Since I'm not a recent immigrant to the States, in fact, I'm a fourth generation, I wanted to have it reflective of my family's journey and then how it's how it's affected me. So I, the body position is kind of introspective, and it's kind of a modified lotus position. And then I used my family crest as my source of power because it represents my family. And so that's on my forehead because my family's in my thoughts a lot, so that's where I put that. And then the heart, I have California, and Katati, California is where I grew up, so that's kind of where my heart's located. And then I have images of where my family came from in Japan, Hiroshima area, and we found out just a few years ago that our family some of them were involved in oyster farming. And I've always loved the ocean, and Shimizu means pure water, so it kind of made sense. And then to contrast that, I had images of oyster beds, rows and rows of the poles in the water on one side, and then contrasting on the other side, rows and rows of the barracks from when the family was interned. And then from other locational things, there's a Torii gate that's in the middle and from Japan. And then the Hawaiian Islands, which is where my family, all sides of my family immigrated to Hawaii and then to the mainland. So that's what I've got going on so far. And then the quote that I have is, "If not me, then who?" And it comes from a famous quote, "If not now, when? If not me, then who?" And I've always found that to be empowering, that one person, I've seen in my life, one person can have a dramatic impact on other people or, world events, and so I figured if you don't try, then you don't know, and there's, limitless possibilities, and you never can tell. You're that one little pebble being tossed into the pond, and you never know what kind of ripples you're going to create, how many people you'll touch. And just over and over again, I found something that I would do that is seemingly simple or innocent can have some kind of an effect on someone else. So it made me more mindful of the actions that I do take and how they might impact others. Our family crest is a plum blossom, and as a kid, growing up after World War II, kind of grew up kind of embarrassed because being Japanese or of Japanese ancestry wasn't a really popular thing to be. And so, I think it was indicative of kids my age. We tended to try to stay in the background and not make examples of ourselves. And some of that came from our parents, that they grew up during the war and suffered the racism and prejudice. So in my 20s, I think it was, so I forget which family member said, "Oh, this is our family crest," and it was something at the time when black power, yellow power, ethnic identity was coming to the fore. I saw that and I said, well, that's a symbol of not only my Japanese heritage, but of my family lineage, and it's something that's been passed down from generation to generation. Because a lot of Japanese immigrants that came to the United States, they were farmers or peasants, and not from nobility. So a lot of them took the family crest of the lord that they served under, or that was the lord of the territory. I'm not exactly sure the derivation of ours, but I'm kind of assuming that that's probably what it was, because we were commoners, and commoners typically didn't have their own family crest. So that, but it helps us identify with where we came from. And then the Torii gate, which is a classic symbol of kind of good luck, and it always, when I went to Japan, they just struck me as these statements, whether they're in the water that you pass through or near when you're going from one location to another, or whether it's an actual gateway that you pass through to go into a temple or a shrine or some area. And I like that because for me, life is a journey, a series of passages or transitions from one thing to another. And being raised Buddhist, I was always taught that the only thing for certain is life is change. It's all about change. Nothing remains static. And I like that because I never feel like my feet are cast in concrete, that there's always possibilities and room for growth and improvement. And then the like I said, the oyster beds, and I have a map of Hawaii, and the symbolism of the rows of barracks from the camp were just, to me, it's iconic in that you see these buildings and you realize that there's a lot of them, and there was a lot of people, a lot of families, and each building housed several families, and they just kind of go off into the distance, and you realize how many people were imprisoned for just the way they looked. And so it's just something that's part of who I, where I come from, and it's an identity that Japanese Americans have in this country. And we always talk about the Holocaust, and if you don't remind people and remember, things like that can happen again. And the same for the internment. And when I worked for the Japanese American Citizens League, it was shortly after the Iranian embassy takeover, and in Congress they were talking about rounding up Iranian Americans and putting them in Shea Stadium, I think it was, and imprisoning them because they were potentially a threat. And I was really pleased when the Japanese American Citizens League spoke up, and other Japanese American legislators said, "We can't do this. Have we not learned our lesson?" And and today with folks that are Muslim, or their ancestors are from the Middle East, or they're recent immigrants, the same racism raises its ugly head, and it's I guess it's human nature, but it's the dark side of human nature.